It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Spring has finally sprung and it's the April edition of Learning Now TV. Welcome along. I hope the sun is starting to shine wherever you are in the world and the spotlight is shining on some amazing learning stories and insights over here at LNTV. Nigel, what have we got on?
First of all, great to see you, Kate. Very nice to see you again. It's been a whole month since we talked. What have we got? We've got some absolutely excellent interviews this time. Firstly, Simon Gibson. Simon is Group Head of L&D at Marks & Spencer's, talking about life as a CLO for a big company going through all sorts of changes and traumas. Stella Collins. Stella is discussing with me the third edition of her book, Neuroscience for Learning. And to get a third edition is pretty good. You know, that's at least I think 5 years since the first edition. So she's sustained that all the way through. It's still relevant. So we talk about what's going on and what's new in this third edition. And then Robin Hoyle, Robin is doing his interviewing stint and he is talking to Will Tolheimer. I talked to Will a few years ago when L10 was very new. Robin is talking to Will about how LTEM has bedded into the evaluation scene. LTEM is an evaluation model developed by Will Tolheimer. And then Martin Cousins talks about a fantastic report called the Randstad Monitor Report. And it looks at 38 countries, I think, looking at attitudes towards work, work environment, learning and development, etc. And there's a wealth of information in there. You should absolutely download that report. Listen to the interview with Martin. It's fascinating. And that's it. That's the highlights.
Enjoy the show.
Enjoy the show.
Regular viewers of Learning Now Television will recognise our next guest, but if you're new to the show or you've missed him previously, please welcome Simon Gibson, who's Group Head of L&D at Marks & Spencer's currently. He's been on the show before at some really interesting organisations, and now he's leading the learning from the front at a very well-known, obviously household name establishment. So Simon, how is it going?
Oh, thanks. And thanks for the very warm welcome. It's going all right, I think, so far. Like I said in our pre-chat, you know, retail's a tough environment. There's a lot going on. We're all consumers. We know the cost of living and the challenges that we're all currently facing. But as a premium retailer, I suppose, in the way that we play in some of our food aspects versus some of our clothing aspects, we're doing well. The business is doing well. And it's been an interesting ride getting to know retail, right, and how it works or doesn't.
What are some of the challenges that you're facing as a business? Because I know you don't like to necessarily go in with a learning lens. You always like to understand what the business drivers are. So I don't know, maybe you can prefix that question by sort of saying how you like to go in and start to understand and tackle some of these challenges, because I always think there's a lot to learn from the way that you like to do that.
Oh, nice, thanks. Yeah, look, everybody seems to have an opinion on Marks and Spencer, right? And it's a brilliant brand with a wonderful reputation. But the world of retailing is different, right? And it does move quite fast. And this desire for us to be a premium, and by premium I mean one of the more well-known omni-channel players that says, yeah, you come into one of our stores, and we talk about our store renewals. And you have a different experience. And I would encourage anybody to go and experience that new version of an in-store experience and what that starts to look like, what that starts to feel like, versus the world of online, right? And buying things from home and or getting things sent to home or to a store. And so the challenges are all interweaved through that of people's buying habits, cost of living, the changing way COVID and digital disruption is still playing out today, a few years after those horrendous effects of lockdown, etc. And we're a business, and I mean this in the nicest possible way. We've invested loads in our people, lots and lots, for years and years and years. They've done really well to invest. But I think there's such a huge opportunity to be very strategically aligned and move away from maybe some of the nice and comforting things that we've done before when times were really good. But then you kind of take your eye off the ball a little bit, don't you, and say, how do we start to attack some of those difficult problems around staff retention? You know, retail is not a very sexy place for many people. But I'm hoping that we can make it more of a sexy place to develop, learn, grow, and build capability than before.
And what are some of the challenges that you've sort of started to address? I think you're about sort of 6 months in to the role now. So what are sort of some of the things that you've maybe started to address now, and then maybe that you've got your eye on longer term?
Yeah, nice. So I'm hoping for the first few months, 6 months in, some people might think that's quite a long time. I've helped showcase the art of the possible of what learning and development, and they are two different things, how we can play a much bigger, better, more robust role in changing skill, capability, and the direction of our business as a force for good moving forward. And that's sometimes quite challenging when you're viewed as quite a traditional, old school training function that does nice things, right? And I'm sure there's many people who may listen to this who will have an interesting view and a challenging view on that. And sometimes that's okay. But I'm the guy that says we need to do more of the stuff that's going to keep this business relevant for another 100 plus whatever years, right? And I think we've got a role to play in that. And moving forward, there's a real big challenge. And interestingly, I'm attending a call and a forum later, right? That a large majority of our workforce don't have a desk. And so this dynamic of deskless workforce, the kind of, how do they develop and grow in a way that is consistent? You've got to go work an 8-hour shift in store. Yeah. You get a couple of 15-minute breaks. If it's at one of our peak times, you'd be lucky to get a couple of 15-minute breaks in. You're not learning anything, right? You're maybe picking up how to do certain things because you're following someone around a store, you're watching something, or you've seen how a certain process works. But in terms of a specific intervention or a product or a thing that we've made to help you, you haven't got time to breathe. So the challenge I've got midterm is, how do I create space and time in this system that values time and productivity, right? So can I get better at showcasing, do this, it makes this difference, and therefore we need this amount of time, whatever this amount of time is, right?
And then longer term, I mean, you and I have had lots of conversations in the last sort of year or so around the skills piece, and obviously it still seems to be, it's not quite the elephant in the room, but nobody has really seemed to have cracked it yet. It's very obviously context led. Different organisations have different needs. But how is that playing out in that retail environment versus, some of the other organisations that you've been in before?
Yeah, I think just because of our employee base, we've got a big opportunity, 60 odd, nearly 70,000 staff. More if you go international. I don't know enough about their skills and capabilities, their aptitudes, their attitude, their desire to learn or grow or be something else. I just think there's such a big opportunity to tap into people's potential, people's skill base, people doing things that we don't know about, and maybe keep them employable. For us, that's great for X amount of years, or re-employable into the wider, predominantly UK economy, and beyond. And that has real value. Now, that's really hard to translate into. That makes good business sense, Simon, if you go and develop X amount of thousand people a year and they all leave, right? Well, the very cliched is, but if we don't do that, right, they're going to leave anyway. So, those that will, and those that won't, don't. So somewhere in the middle, I just think there's such a fabulous opportunity for us to really pick at and be very clear about, and we're trying to do that at the moment, of define what do we mean by an omni-channel skill set, because actually those that are leading and running these functions, no disrespect to them, weren't brought up in this digital age. They didn't learn in this digital age that you and I were talking about in terms of smartphone and how early children have been using those. What's an iPhone? 13, 14 years old, right? In terms of its connectivity, productivity, the investment in tech in our shops and your store experience will radically continue to change. Go look at one of our store renewals, like I said. And so, yeah, there's just such a huge opportunity. I'm amazed by any time I go to a store, and I'm fortunate enough to go to many and speak to many people who then share with you, did you know I've done this? Did you know I do this? Did you know? And obviously I don't, right? I don't.
It's not, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm going to ask you the question. How do you get to that? And is technology a part of gaining that picture and insight around people's skills and potential?
Yeah, look, people might be bored if they listen to what I say, right? And I've talked about recently, but I've got 3 simple questions, right? And so one is, what are the skills and capabilities you've got today in your organization? Not jobs. I don't need to know about jobs. I need to know about your skills and capabilities.
Really important.
What are your skills and capabilities you need for tomorrow? And when I talk about tomorrow, I'm saying, okay, let's just take a bet, 18, 24 months time. Because guess what? The current evidence suggests you go any further, things will get really hazy really quick. I'm not an economist, right? But let's just go a few years out. What have you got today? What do you need for tomorrow? And then the third point is, well, how can you understand the delta and the gap, right? And so to answer your question is, well, there are some wonderful, it's such a birth of technology, especially with artificial intelligence. People that are skinning the internet, reading job descriptions, looking at the shift in job descriptions, looking at different skills appearing in job descriptions, using skills taxonomies, understanding the deltas, the shift, understanding the shift that technology would play on your workforce. Somewhere in the middle of that is, yes, tech does have a role to play, right? A system, an infrastructure, a scaffold. Something's got to provide that either macro insight that you're not getting. There's lots of great reports, as you and I know, right? There's lots of macro reports. Here's some data from 2x whatever years ago. Here's some data from such and such years ago. Great. What about last month? How many jobs had data requirements in them on LinkedIn last month? What is the global shortfall for software engineering skills and capability, allowing that there's many different disciplines in that? And somewhere you've kind of got to answer those questions with a lens on, well, what does that mean to your organization? What does that mean to your business?
Yeah. It's just such a mammoth topic, isn't it? And I think, I would love, I'm very much hoping that, on Learning Now TV, we're going to get a chance to pull at that thread a little bit more, because it just feels like we sort of skate the surface, really. But just with sort of a minute or so to go, what are you most excited about? Hopefully you can come back on at some point, maybe later in the year, and tell us how you're getting on.
Oh, thanks. I'd love to. Right. What am I most excited about? Look, I'm the guy that says we should be aiming for the moon, right? And I firmly believe we've got such huge opportunity and potential to do that really well at a famous, very well known, very well loved brand. I'm excited about making a difference to thousands and thousands of people in my organization, and whether they stay with us or they go somewhere else. And I think that's pretty cool. And that's wrapped with your point earlier on, which is, I want to make this business profitable. I'm not a capitalist, right? I just, if we don't make money, we don't move, right? Yeah. And that leads to lots of people losing their job. That's not cool, right? I'd much rather be excited and energized by how do we help this company be, as, like I said, successful and profitable in many years ahead. And I want a tiny slither of a role to play in that. So I would love to come back and talk more to that when we've got more evidence on what we're doing.
I think we always run out of time, but I think, that what you said there about making a difference is what I always think of you, Simon. So it's really exciting to see the work that you and the team are doing. You've obviously made some really exciting recruits from some familiar faces across the industry as well. So look forward to checking back in with you later in the year.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. and get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
There has been a clamoring, that's the best I can describe it, a clamoring to bring back the Martin Cousins research report. And he has responded. So today, Martin is going to introduce us to a very interesting report. So first of all, Martin, welcome. And secondly, what is the report?
Thank you, Nigel, and always delighted to hear there's been a bit of clamouring for a good research report. So I don't aim to disappoint today. So we're going to be looking at the 2023 Randstad Work Monitor, a rather large report that's in its 20th year. And it is not a typical learning report by any stretch of the imagination. It's far more about the work experience rather than the focus being on learning. And I think that is still worthy of consideration because obviously there's just kind of so much going on for businesses and organisations. And this is more to do with the bigger picture. It's like, well, what is it that working people want from their employers, really, and kind of what experience and preferences around the work experiences do they have? That's what this is about. So I think it's worthy of our attention. It's a very big report. It talked to 35,000 workers all around the globe at the tail end of 2022, and it looked at workers aged between 18 and 67. So you get a big sort of range of opinion across the globe and across different age cohorts within the workforce.
Martin, I thought 67 was an incredibly young age to cut the report off. I don't know about you, but there's a massive demographic that they're clearly missing from their research. But the other thing is that the 38 countries at the back of the report, a big chunk of the report is an individual profile of each of the countries that responded. So they amalgamate the data. So you get a very interesting individual country perspective. And it's fascinating, the similarities, but also the difference between countries that you'd think, oh, yes, we look at the world exactly the same. Yeah. Probably the answer is no, we don't. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are kind of different layers to this report because it's so big and so kind of international. It provides you with comparative data across different countries. So for a start, if you're an international brand or business, then it's just useful as a benchmark. But the thing is, it's what is it talking about? I think that's the thing that we need to, get to, because I think, yes, it is really useful and you can go and have a look at your specific country data and insight. But what it's actually talking about is these kind of attitudes to work. It has a look at 5 areas. So I've just got that on my other screen. So it's kind of attitudes to work, expectations of work, job security, what it calls unretirement, and belonging at work. So these are quite big areas, and I think the reason why HR, anyone in HR will be interested in this research, and I think for learning, it's a lot more to do with what are people's overall kind of feel and expectations of the workplace. And I think that does matter, because when you talk about learning, you're always talking about motivation. And I think what is motivating people to stay in work and want to continue to develop at work might be quite different to what that may have been 10 years ago. I don't know that we talk about that enough in the learning industry. I'm not aware of it. Maybe I'm missing. I'm sure there are pockets of inquiry around this, but that's just an interesting area in and of itself, especially when you look at skills.
But Martin, also, just if I can interrupt quickly, it's also fundamental in terms of willingness to undertake learning or be committed to building careers. If you've got the wrong attitude and you're totally demotivated, or you feel deeply insecure, then it makes the job of the learning team almost impossible. So to not address these issues strikes me as being very naive. And there's nothing that couldn't be improved, like attitude, expectations, security, the concept of unretirement, i.e. coming back to the workforce, and belonging, all have their corollary in development. And you could really take this and work out an entire program of opportunity for staff, reflecting the different demographics and the different attitudes in different countries if you're a global organization. So it's kind of rich, and it's in some ways it's very sad what you're saying, which is that HR will be interested, but L&D don't take any of this into account, whereas it's fundamental, I would have thought.
Well, but maybe there won't be any more clamoring after this for more research reports if I make statements like that. Now, I of course could be proved completely wrong, so that maybe that's not correct what I've just said, but I think it's what I'm trying to say is it's linking a report like this with what that might mean for learning and development. And I think what's interesting here is, so let's take some of the research. I would quit a job if it was preventing me from enjoying my life. 18 to 24-year-olds, 58% say they would. Now, when we talk about expectation, that's an example of, at the moment, do we see younger people in the workplace have a different expectation around staying in the workplace and staying in a role, and for how long and why? I think that is really key to what learning might look like for them in terms of what they, what's required, how and why. And I think that's what I mean by that, because as you get older, that diminishes that desire to, I would leave my job in order to enjoy my life more, goes down to 40% for 55 to 67-year-olds. And obviously,
there's a second statistic which is also interesting, which I picked up, which is I would quit a job if I didn't feel like I belong there. 61% of 18 to 24-year-olds, and even 55 to 67-year-olds, 50%. That is extraordinary. I would quit a job if I felt I didn't belong there. So there's all this emotion around work, which wasn't there previously. People just hung in, like it or not like it. But there seems to have been a sea change coming through, washing through work, where people want meaning and belonging, and they want opportunities.
But I mean, I think that's okay. But we need to look at the broader context within which organisations are operating. So if there is low unemployment and there is demand for jobs, then it's a lot easier for someone who's 18 to 24 to be able to say that and do it, I think. I'm not trying to be a cynic here, and I'm not saying that this stuff isn't really important. But if there weren't the jobs available, then would that still be the case? Quite possibly it would. But I think it's an interesting time, because we're talking about the motivation here, and actually there is low unemployment in a lot of markets, even though there are big financial pressures at the moment, and there may be stagflation, and then we may be on the edge of some form of recession. But I think that's quite interesting. When you've got a more buoyant opportunities, then does that affect how people see work? That they've got choices. So actually, I could go somewhere where I would enjoy working more. I think, and I'm not trying to diminish it. I'm just trying to say that the factors around it, I think, are quite important. And this sort of report helps us bring us some understanding. So I thought another area that was really quite interesting was flexibility. So the importance of flexibility in terms of working hours for 18 to 24-year-olds is 81%, but it goes higher for 25 to 34-year-olds, 84%, 35 to 44, 85%. I mean, it only goes down to 80%. 80% say it's important, the flexibility of working hours for 55 to 67-year-olds. That's really interesting. The fact that there's such a high expectation around work flexibility. Now, I think that probably isn't altogether surprising now, post 2020 and the pandemic, and the fact that, everyone sort of became hybrid at that point. But not everyone, but lots of people did. But if that expectation is now set, then that's quite interesting in terms of, what that means for the workplace. What kind of hours people would like to be working, and also where they would like to work, and that is a really important factor now.
Yeah. I completely agree.
I think that's quite a big change. The thing is, when asked, my job provides flexibility in terms of working hours, then the percentage is a lot lower. So even though it's an important factor, people don't feel that they're getting that flexibility. Now, in terms of other types of data points in here, we've got lots of stuff around salary. I mean, it is important. Belonging is important, but actually we've got a cost of living crisis. And, companies are actually really helping people with trying to get through that. So salary, I think in the past, salary was never the number one driver for work, where you worked. But and maybe you can perceive that as a sort of hygiene factor, but I don't think it is a hygiene factor, not in a cost of living crisis. People need to be able to live, and financial security is more of an issue now than it has been. So I think here we have more than half of respondents say they're concerned about the global economy's impact on their livelihood, and more than a third are worried about losing their job. So there are paradoxes here, because on the one side you've got, I'd like to enjoy my life, and I would move job if I wasn't enjoying my life. But on the other side, you've also got there's a lot of concern around not having enough money to be able to live. So it's like balancing those two things is probably quite hard for people. They want job security, and they also want the kind of balance in their work life that enables them to be able to enjoy life too. But as you said, I think very wisely pointed out earlier, these are the kind of things that are now on the table for people. It is the purpose, the belonging. Why am I doing this work? How am I doing it? And how much am I enjoying it? And what are my work preferences? These things are things that I don't think we talked about as much as we do now.
I agree. Martin, I think we should pause at that point and say to people, it's a free download. There's a crawl on the screen. Read it. Because for me, this is a fascinating document that gives agendas running forward for the next year or two. So I think kind of don't be naive, foolish, those who ignore all this stuff and just carry on blithely when the whole meaning and context of work is changing beneath our feet. And this report puts its finger on it. So Martin, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for adding this report. And there will be, I hope, many to follow.
Indeed. Thanks, Nigel.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite. You just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question. You might want to answer this later.
me, so you love this.
It's a delight to catch up with Stella Collins. Stella is the COO and founder of Stella Labs. And I'm going to talk to her about two things. And the first is a kind of celebration. Stella very soon is going to welcome the third edition of her book, Neuroscience for Learning and Development, onto the shelves. And that is an amazing achievement. People might not know that, but getting a first edition out is pretty impressive. A second, excellent. A third edition, exceptional. So it's been around for about 8 years. And the fact that it has lasted this long is a tribute to its perception, really, and its relevance carrying on through over a time when there's been an absolute explosion of information about neuroscience for learning. So congratulations on sticking to it. And for those that don't know, tell us, Stella, roughly, what is the book about? Can you summarize the book a little bit?
Yeah, and it's really about, what is learning? How does learning happen at a foundational level in our brains and bodies? I think it's hugely important to think about bodies. And it's also, I define neuroscience quite broadly. So it's kind of cognitive science. It's the science base of learning. So it's the psychology, the neuroscience, lots of fundamental stuff about, the sticky, squishy brain bits. But fundamentally what it is it's a book for practitioners to really think about, if this is the case, if this is how our brains really learn and our bodies, then what do we need to do as practitioners in the real world? And I think one of the reasons that it's kind of got longevity is, despite the world changing so much over those last few years, actually the foundations of how our brains learn is still the same as it has been for millennia.
Yeah, and still you need to remind people about those basics. And it's the kind of book that you can read all the way through, put it aside, but really and truly its value is picking it up and going over bits of it and double checking and using it to reinforce assumptions about learning. So I think it for the individual, it's got longevity as well. It's a kind of book to remain close by rather than the book to read and put back on the shelf.
Yeah.
And never
I use it for reference myself.
Yes, I'm sure you do. I go back to it as well. I think there's lots of very helpful elements to it, but I haven't read the third edition yet. So what is new? What is going to be in the third edition that isn't there in the other two?
So there's some updates to the science because, science does change. So I've added in, new stuff that's come up that I've been interested in that I think is relevant and useful. One of the chapters I talk very much about a model of learning, and I've updated that model from a model that was a good model, but I never liked the title. It was accelerated learning. And I always think that made it sound like it was going to be faster. And I think we all know that learning is not necessarily fast. So that model has changed. There's some fundamental bits around kind of how we talk about the brain. So when I first wrote the book, it was networks were known, but not quite so important. So now it's that interconnectivity of the networks. And then there's a whole new chapter on learning to learn and kind of what that means in an organizational context, whether we're calling it self-directed learning, autonomous learning, doesn't really matter what you call it, but there's a whole new chapter on the practical aspects of that, but also what's the science saying about self-directed learning.
Excellent. And are you a fan? You think that's the direction that we're going to go?
I think
we all, organizations.
Yeah, we all need to learn how to learn because it's like the foundational skill underlying everything. And if you have that knowledge about how to learn effectively and you do it, the knowledge is insufficient, but you actually do it, then you can make learning easier for everything.
Yes, I think that's right. And when you look at mindsets, I think that belief that you are a learner and that you can learn goes an awful long way into creating agility and optimism about the future. And I think a lot of the pessimism and I can't change is based on an essential negative feeling that I've got this far and I really don't want to go any further. Yeah. I'm too scared to reach out because it's too difficult. Yeah. And it's not difficult.
And in a world where change is happening, it happens because we instigate it, but it happens without us instigating it. If you know you can adapt and you know how to adapt, you're much more ready to deal with the stuff that the world throws at us. It doesn't always make it easy, but at least you've got that, as you say, that mindset that, yeah, I can deal with this, I can handle this, I can move forward.
I think that's right. And also, you need the same for the organization. The organization has to be agile. And you can't have an agile organization full of people who go, no, I don't want to do that. It's too scary. So there's great advantage in moving forward on both fronts. And I think you're right. This is absolutely du jour. It's not something that is 8 years old. This is absolutely contemporary, bang on relevant, and people should embrace it and read it. The book comes out in June, so it's just in its last stages of final proofing, but keep an eye open for it. You see the cover on the screen, then when you see the book, get a copy. I think it's well worth it. And if you have bought the first edition, it may be worth buying the third and updating your knowledge and your I suppose your attitude towards learning, self-directed learning, and agility in organizations. That's the fundamental heart of the book, I think. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely.
Good, excellent. And the second thing I want to talk to you about is the delight from everyone at Learning Now TV that you're going to do a regular series for us. 6 little insights on what? What's it going to be about, Stella? 6 insights on
neuroscience.
Good.
And how you can use it for learning, indeed. But again, I want it to be really practical. So we talk about, kind of some really key elements, some things that everybody needs to know, and some people will obviously know some of it. Trying to introduce a few, perhaps new things people may not know. But again, what I've done is I've invited some colleagues along to contribute with, how does this work for them? If this piece of neuroscience holds true, which generally it does, then what does that mean in terms of their practice? So again, it's very focused on practical application of what we know about learning and how learning can work really, really effectively.
Yeah. So it's 6 collections of insights focusing on what you can do.
Yeah.
I think it'd be unmissable. And once it's gone out on the program, it's available on the website. And what we'll do at the end is bundle them together so you can download all of them and take them forward along with the book, looking at what neuroscience offers in our practice. And it's about practice, isn't it? This is not theory. This is about how we do things better, how we do things differently, based on science, not on nonsense or on things that are made up.
Yeah.
So
it's the doing that's so important.
The doing is important, and doing underpinned by science.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
That sums you up, really, doesn't it? That's
yes,
Stella
it does.
Collins, doing underpinned by science. That could be your watchword.
I shall have to change my my headings on LinkedIn and things.
Stella, it's an absolute pleasure to catch up with you. Thank you very much for making the time, and good luck with the book. And I'll really enjoy the series as it comes through. Thank you very much.
Nigel.
Starting at the end of April. Thank you very much. And we also have Rob Clark with his regular update on news, views, and happenings in the L&D sector.
Learning Technologies is the world's leading conference on workplace learning and technology, and it gets underway again this May the 3rd and 4th in London. 10,000 learning professionals are expected. There's an exhibition of learning tech and a conference presented by around 100 learning technology experts to help people with workplace learning strategy. Its chairperson and host is, of course, Don Taylor, and he joins me now. Good morning, Don. 2023 is the 24th Learning Technologies Conference.
It seems impossible, Rob. I had a full head of completely non-grey hair when we started. It keeps going strong. It's a reflection of what a vibrant industry we're in.
It is. What have you got lined up for visitors this year, Don?
Lots of case studies. We're really focusing on case studies this year with people coming in, using our expert chairs and facilitators to bring out the best of their stories, to share stuff that's useful for people to put to work. The most popular session is always the emerging technology session, giving us an overview of what's new and what's happening. We know that skills-based talent management is really hot at the moment. And so we have what the reality is of doing that on the ground today, a couple of case studies around doing that. We've got Donald Clark talking about AI, which is super hot at the moment. We also have AI embedded in a lot of the other sessions we're doing. So the emerging technology session will certainly include stuff about AI. So will skills-based talent management. So will learning analytics. So will learning implementation. There are lots of sessions in which we can expect AI to pop up because it's part of the way we do our jobs now. And also we've got stuff for people wanting to develop themselves. Your first 100 days as an L&D manager, what should you do? Practical stuff like that.
Alongside the conference is the Learning Technologies exhibition, 200 companies with the latest workplace learning tech solutions for visitors. And one of those, with one of the biggest stands at the event, is Omniplex Learning, and its head of marketing, Nuz Saeed, is here. Nuz, great to see you again. First, a quick reminder, what does Omniplex Learning do?
Nice to see you too. So Omniplex Learning, we're a complete learning solution provider. So imagine having multiple learning tools and resources at your fingertips, a suite of solutions such as authoring tools, learning management solutions, e-learning design, digital adoption, all in one place. That's us.
You've one of the biggest stands at the show, Nuz. What have you got planned? What are you doing at the show this year?
In particular, we're focused on sharing more about Omniplex Guide, which is our latest digital adoption platform, which enables users to learn the skills they need in the flow of work. You can use it for onboarding, systems training, data accuracy, digital transformation projects. There's a need to simplify learning, and this does that by offering kind of step-by-step instructions where it's needed, and that's what Omniplex Guide does, and that's front and centre of what we're going to be doing at the show this year.
Kineo is one of the best known brands in digital learning. It's exhibited at Learning Technologies for many years and is back again for 2023. And Andy Costello from Kineo is here. Andy, what has Kineo got planned for Learning Technologies this year?
Good to see you. Thank you. And yes, I mean, firstly, I'm just delighted to say that we are super excited to come back this year. And we're really excited about showcasing all our products and services across learning content, learning platforms, including two of our latest launches. We've got a new learning platform called Totara, Kineo Edition. You'll be familiar with our work with Totara for many years now as co-founders of the platform. But also something I'm really, really excited about is our new learning analytics service. So we'll be talking all things Kineo analytics, learning analytics, data, and how data can drive your better learning content programs. Very excited about that.
Fabulous. Now, you keep coming back to this show year after year. What do you like about this event, Andy?
Well, it's the event, I would say, in the world. It is vibrant, it's lively, it's dynamic, it's always interesting. There's never a dull moment. The footfall that comes across the exhibition floor is just something to behold, as are all the stands and all the things that our colleagues and peers in the industry are showcasing. This is where people are really talking and showcasing the latest and the greatest innovations in our industry. It's the place to be, really, to find out what's going on and what might just be around the corner.
Just navigating the show is overwhelming, and this year there's the new HR technology show running alongside. Fortunately, Fosway makes it a little easier with its reports on both these markets, and Fiona Letney is here with me today. Fiona, firstly, Learning Technologies, there's over 200 exhibitors and a lot to get around. Fosway reports on the workplace learning tech vendors. What can visitors expect to see?
Well, yes, you're right. It's absolutely huge, and it can be daunting if you're going there for the first time, or even after a number of years. As you can imagine, AI, I am sure, is going to come out there at the forefront. It's been in the news a lot. And so that can be involved in personalization. It can be involved in the adaptive learning. It can be part of skills, and it's an opportunity to go and have a look at it. And I'm sure there'll be lots of VR headsets and a lot about immersive learning as well. Feel free to download the 9-grid reports that we do. You might have only ever seen the image, but actually there's a lot of information. So do your homework. What is it you're looking for? Is it a product? Is it a partner? Come to the stand if you need any advice or direction. We can point you in the right direction because we're independent and we know the vendors.
There might be a few people watching who haven't been and might be thinking about coming for the first time. Why should people attend this event?
all learning and development professionals do a great job, but very often they're working in isolation. This event is your opportunity to get out and meet your colleagues, meet the suppliers, and hear from experts who are sharing what they're doing, what's happening, and what people are thinking in learning development. Refresh your thinking and build great connections to take you through for another year of great work.
Thank you, Don, and thank you to each of my guests today: Fiona Letney from Fosway, Andy Costello from Kineo, and Nus Saeed from Omniplex Learning. Learning Technologies promises to be another great show this May, and an important one as the economy tightens and L&D and HR look for ways to help business through the tricky year ahead. Learning News will of course be there covering the event. I'll be reporting from the exhibition, and I hope to see you there.
Robin Hoyle is back once again, doggedly, determinedly getting into the detail and under the skin of some of the learning issues and challenges of the day. And this month, he's revisiting LTEM, the evaluation method that Dr. Will Tolheimer created, and how it's been going since its launch 5 years ago. 5 years! Can't believe it. But I'm looking forward to the update.
Yep, I remember it like yesterday.
Dr. Will Thalheimer, thank you ever so much for joining us on Learning Now TV. Now, unbelievably, the Learning Transfer Evaluation Model has just celebrated its 5th birthday. And 2018, when you first came up with that 8-tier model of how better to evaluate what's going on back in the workplace following a learning or training intervention, an awful lot has happened. I mean, we've had pandemics, we've now got some kind of economic crisis in many countries of the world, we've got wars going on, for goodness sake. So has LTEM stood the test of time? And in that intervening 5-year period, what have you learned?
Great question. And thanks for having me, Robin. So, I was, working around the L&D field for a while, and I, saw that people were unhappy with the traditional 4-level model. And so I thought, what's missing? What can we do? And so I created LTEM. The idea was to encourage us to think about some things, to do more of them, and some things to do less of them. So, for example, LTEM Tier 7 and 8 are transfer behavior change, and then Tier 8 is sort of organizational performance or other outcomes for learners, et cetera. And then LTEM also has 3 levels that are related to learning. So knowledge, decision-making competence, and task competence. And those are sort of key to bring learning wisdom back into the conversation. And then we have lower level tiers about learner perceptions, learner activity, and learner attendance. So over 5 years, when I put it out there, I really didn't know what would happen. People told me, Will, this is too complex for the learning and development field. We need 3-level models and 4-level models. Come on. I've actually been remarkably happy, surprised, pleased with how LTEM has begun to infiltrate across the world. A lot of learning teams are doing it. One of the mistakes I'm not sure it was a mistake, but I gave LTEM away for free. I didn't even ask people to put in their email, and so I sort of lost track of how people are using it. So just recently, I've started to grab case studies and stories about how people are using LTEM, and people are using it all different types of ways. They use it for gap analysis. What are we doing now? What can we do better? I want to have a conversation with a new internal customer or external customer. Let's start with LTEM. What do you want to accomplish? I want to design a new learning intervention. Oh, let's start with LTEM. Let's think about what our main goals are. So it's really taken off. I'm very pleased with that. In fact, in the recent Tier 1 learning trends survey that we did, we asked people an open-ended question. Hey, what learning evaluation models are you using? And 38% of organizations said Kirkpatrick, 28% said LTEM. Now, that could be somewhat of a sample thing with people joining that survey, but it does show you that LTEM's not, that it has taken off. So I'm very pleased with that result.
And in terms of its focus around, the name gives it away, really. It's about learning transfer. It's about what people do differently as a result of being involved in some kind of learning or training intervention. Is that a focus that you're seeing more widely spread across organizations? Those 28% who are using LTEM, do you think they're really starting with the end in mind, I guess, and focusing on how do we want people to behave differently?
Absolutely. And if you think about that's a learning evaluation thing, and that's a learning design thing. Now, we've had this meme, if you will, in the field for a long time. We should be more performance focused, right? But I think more and more teams are not satisfied just doing the same old training for training's sake. So yeah, I think we are more interested in that in general.
And I think one of the things that's driving that is obviously we've got access to more and more data. Partly that's to do with digital transformation around organizations and all the rest of it. But what I do find is that people are spending their time giving value to the things which are easy to measure.
Oh, yeah.
We're measuring the things which are really important. And you've advocated, campaigned almost for a return to what we might call meaningful data. In fact, the phrase that you use a lot. So what is that meaningful data in terms of learning transfer, in terms of people changing their performance? And how can organizations more effectively, particularly L&D teams, more effectively capture that data in terms of what's happening in the workplace?
Yeah. So let me start out by telling you a story. So I was at this big consulting firm, and I'd given a presentation about learning evaluation, and then I sat on the side, and their learning evaluation team gave a presentation to all their learning people. And what they were doing was showing them this new brilliant dashboard that they created using Tableau or Power BI or one of those, and it looked beautiful. And their head of learning got up in the back of the room and said, "This is exactly where we need to be going." And, there's cheers and applause. And I just kept my mouth shut because I knew that underneath that beautiful dashboard, there was pathetically poor data. Really. And so later I advocated to the team, hey, you got to go beyond the poor learner surveys that you're using to create this data. So one of the things we have to be really careful of now is that we now have tools that can make data look beautiful. Yeah. But the question we have to ask is, where does that data come from? Is it meaningful? We know, I have written a book on how to do better learner surveys. But at the same time, in the book, I say, hey, whatever you do, don't just stop with learner surveys. Now, it's a good entry point. And when we do them, we ought to do them well and avoid some of the pitfalls we've done in the past by focusing only on satisfaction and reputation. We can focus on things that are more closely tied to learning effectiveness. Things like, are the learners comprehending? Are they motivated to actually apply it? Are they going to be able to remember? Are they getting realistic practice? Do they have after training supports? We can focus on these things in our questions as opposed to asking about the temperature in the room. Is the organization of the curriculum good? Things that learners aren't very good at answering anyway. We can ask them questions that they can wrap their heads around, and that we can look at that data and go, oh, wait, this looks like maybe we're missing a little bit. We're not giving enough realistic practice. Maybe we need to go back and think about that.
And I think that idea of focusing on, do they have workplace support? There's almost a kind of validation piece there, isn't there? Which is that they'll reply on a survey to say, yeah, I've got workplace support. My boss and my peers give me encouragement to use the things that I have learned back in the workplace. But we know that there's a big gap between good intention and good practice. So is it the L&D team's job to, not for every program maybe, but for some programs, to just go and audit that, to go and validate what people have said in the survey, in the spirit of what you said about don't just rely on surveys.
Absolutely. Try to make a connection between what people are saying and what's actually happening on the ground. But, you said something really interesting there that I want to tie back. One of the things we can do with our learner survey questions is collect data. But the other thing we can do is we can nudge action. We can send messages. And if we step back a minute and think, what are our goals for evaluation? Well, we want to be able to make better decisions and take better actions. So one of the things I advocate, in fact, in the second edition of my book, I added a chapter on this, how to send messages with our questions. There's this great story in the book. Ian Blake worked for Tetra Pak. He's a smart guy. He's a learning and development, experienced practitioner. And he decided he wanted to introduce new learner surveys to his folks there. And he's pretty smart. He said, we got a change management issue here. I'm not just going to roll this out. I'm going to bring people into the office. I'm going to show them this new survey. I'm going to get their feedback, et cetera. So one day he invited this guy in and he's going through the questions. And one of the questions was about after training support. And Ian had tailored the question a little bit, which I highly recommend tailoring your questions. And he had added this one response, and the question was something about like, what support will you get after training to make sure that you can put this into practice in your work? And Ian had added this one option, and this is the learner saying this, I will be added to my instructor's Yammer group to reinforce the learning after. And this subject matter expert trainer came in, and as he got to that question and saw that Yammer response, he goes, what the heck is that Yammer thing? That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. That's crazy. Take that out of there. So Ian thanked him and, went his way. The next day, the guy gets in touch with him and say, Ian, I was thinking about that Yammer question last night. And, I think it's brilliant. I'm now going to add Yammer to every workshop that I teach. Now think about that. No survey had ever been shown to a learner. No data had been collected. And yet we had pushed action. We had changed what we were doing on our learning team just by asking questions that got people thinking.
And getting people thinking is what it's all about. Dr. Will Talheimer, I think you've certainly given us lots to think about. Thank you very much for appearing on Learning Now TV again. Cheers.
Thanks for inviting me, Robin.
Well, time flies when you're having fun. That is it for the April edition of Learning Now TV. Nigel, there's always a lot for us to discuss and digest. We never really have enough time, but any highlights for you this month?
What I thought was really interesting, Kate, was that virtually everybody who spoke was big picture focused, not detail. And I think that's really interesting. And maybe this is the time for people thinking more holistically, thinking more strategically. So whether it's Will Talheimer talking about his think again about evaluation, Simon Gibson focusing on the big picture for Marks and Spencer's, or Martin really looking at the whole work agenda, the very, very broad work agenda, not just narrow issues around HR or L&D. So all of them kind of complemented each other, I think. What do you reckon?
It's a theme that I'm coming across every day in my job. You and I are very lucky we get to speak to a rich variety of people, practitioners, leaders, vendors, analysts, and we are all at the mercy of these big picture trends, whether that's the economy, the impact of the situation in the Ukraine, the pace of technology, all the kerfuffle that there seems to be out there around, generative AI, ChatGPT, etc. What's that going to do to the kind of the future of skills, education? All of this impacts what we are all trying to do in our practice day to day, and we can't be an ostrich and bury our heads in the sand. We have to be paying attention to this and thinking about how that affects us, today, but also how do you plan for tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a big issue, isn't it? And I've banged on for a long time that L&D should not look inwardly to itself and to its reference, its colleagues, and this is a good course and that's a better course. It should be looking at how do we actually change the world and how do we change our organization. And that seemed to be running through as a really live theme in the whole of today's program. It's excellent. It's great. Really good stuff.
Yeah, and I think we're at Learning Now TV, we're looking at kind of expanding that focus as well, right? And kind of pulling in some of those outside influences. And I think that's really important for us to be able to reflect that as well.
I completely agree. So watch this space and watch what's coming on in the future. Next week is Learning Technologies. It's back on the 3rd and 4th of May in the Excel Centre in London. And it's a pretty packed program. It's going to be loads and loads of people there. It's a complete sellout. So
featuring some guy called Dr. Nigel Payne, I think, somewhere.
Well, featuring, I think, is probably over egging it, Kate. Yeah, somewhere in the minor corner of the 14th.
No, never.
But I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun. We've also got CIPD, the Festival of Work, on the 7th to 9th of June, and that's in London Olympia. And Elliot is back on the road. Elliot Maisie, bless his cotton socks. We're no longer learning 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever. Elliot's now created this new Festival of Learning, and that's on the 15th of July in New York. And it's going to be much more conversational than presentational. And it's a kind of theme that Elliot's been working on. How do we actually engage at a very profound level with the challenges that people face? And he's created this whole environment around that. So I think that's going to be very, very interesting indeed. And then finally, the LPI has Learning Live 13th to the 14th of September in London. Pretty good, eh?
Yeah, I saw they've just confirmed Gary Neville as a speaker. I think that's fascinating.
Absolutely.
I think that, I always find the crossover around sort of leadership and great sporting feats very interesting, but he's really become a mouthpiece and a spokesperson for so much else these days as well. I think that would be really fascinating as we talk about the big picture.
He's got a big heart, I think, Gary Neville. Yeah, he's put his money where his mouth is. And I admire him for that hugely. Yeah, and we've got the next program. Next program is on the 25th of May. And we'll see you there, won't we?
See you there.
Me and you, Kate, yet again.
Always, Nigel, always.
Always, always.
Forever.
Let's hope so. Bye then.
Bye for now.